Now then, you join me on a suitably snowy hillside to share the story of forgotten adventurer Maurice Wilson, whose incredible attempt to claim the first ascent of Everest by crash landing a biplane on its slopes and walking to the summit is told in this month's Adventurers Inc. The Moth and the Mountain by Ed Caesar. Now, it's a bit cold, my jaw isn't working properly, and it's going to start to snow in a minute. So, from a rather damp copy of The Moth and the Mountain, let's make a start. Before he began his trek to Mount Everest, Maurice Wilson changed into a magnificent costume. He was 35 years old, and the fine blonde hair of his youth had run to silver and thinned to a widow's peak. 2 or 3 machine gun scars blotted the skin on his left arm and back, like pitch marks on a golf green. His arm still ached every day, and so did his knees, the legacy of an inexpert parachute jump, made more than a year earlier. Nevertheless, he was fit, strong, and rail thin after months of training, intermittent fasting, and long periods of sober living. Wilson was not a handsome man, not exactly. The features were too pronounced. The picture hung a little askew. But even in his current unkempt state, when a scruffy new beard carpeted his usually smooth cheeks, he was beguiling. Many women had fallen hard for Wilson's blue-green eyes, boyish green, and his percussive Yorkshire accent with its sonorous vowels and dropped H's. He was unlike other men. He was difficult to ignore. Night had fallen. Wilson dressed in his hotel room in the hill town of Darjeeling, which lay in the northeast of Britain's vast Indian Empire. Within a few hours, Wilson would start to walk more than 300 miles to the north side of Everest in Tibet. He then planned to climb alone, and in doing so, to become the first person ever to reach its summit, the highest place on earth. The idea was mad any way you looked at it. No climber from 4 separate official British expeditions had reached the summit of Everest, and those parties had comprised the best alpinists of their generation, supported by teams of porters carrying bountiful supplies. The odds of a novice such as Wilson succeeding where those missions had failed were vanishingly long, as every pundit had told him. But Wilson was not interested in expert opinions. Otherwise, he'd have turned back long ago. He was interested in the power of human will and the motions of the soul. Everest was a job he felt he had within him. Wilson had been strictly forbidden by the British authorities to make the journey, and the Tibetan government had not given him permission to enter their kingdom either. The British were anxious to avoid a diplomatic incident. If Wilson was discovered at any point on his trek, he'd be arrested. And for that reason, he paid his hotel bill 6 months in advance to throw the police off the scent. He also planned to leave Darjeeling at midnight in disguise as a Tibetan priest. So begins Ed Caesar's The Moth and the Mountain, which is our book for December. I thought it was a fabulous story. I'd not come across Maurice Wilson. I think he's a properly forgotten adventurer, a real eccentric, and the story of his adventure is one that you won't forget once you've read it. So I do hope you enjoy The Moth and the Mountain. Set that off. And then we'll come and plonk ourselves down. It's slippy. His arm still ached every day. So did his knees. The legacy of an inexpert parachute jump. Parachute? My chin's getting cold. Parachute jump. Really much like whichever way you do it. Hello. The odds of a novice such as Wilson succeeding where those missions had failed were vanishingly long.